G'day Guardians, Rogi here, and today we're going to be reviewing that new hotness, Thermoclastic Blooming, being paired with the ugly duckling of Hunter Exotics, Star Eater Scales. Thermoclastic Blooming is a pretty straightforward mod, granting you orbs of power upon a solar or stasis melee kill. Now, this pairs incredibly well with the Revenant's Withering Strike melee ability, which can typically kill 3 red bar enemies per melee charge, spawning you 3 orbs of power. Now, just this combination alone already makes Thermoclastic Blooming and Stasis Hunter an insane synergy, but today we're going to be pushing that synergy as far as it can possibly go. Star Eater Scales is the natural exotic to pair with this mod, increasing the amount of super energy generated per orb and then allowing us to overcharge our super by picking up an additional 8 orbs, increasing the damage output of something like Silence and Squall by 120%, and also providing us with an overshield as if the previous buffs were not enough. Star Eater Scales launched alongside Season of the Splicer and were an instant success. Unfortunately, this was due to a bug that increased weapon damage by 120% after using a fully charged super. Star Eater Scales were promptly disabled before the Vault of Glass raid, and the weapon damage later patched out. Even though this change was a bug fix and not a nerf, it felt like Star Eater Scales had been gutted and were no longer a viable choice for meta activities. I tried using Star Eater Scales a few times in the past, each time feeling very underwhelmed, as I wanted to live that fantasy of throwing at the perfect, fully overcharged super, clearing the room or chunking a boss. Yet the sad reality was crossing my fingers, hoping that my blueberries were running masterworked weapons to generate those orbs of power, and then chasing down every orb of power I could see, oftentimes building up my 8 times Feast of Light stacks moments before the last dreg fell. Not a fun experience. Enter Thermoclastic Blooming, an easy, reliable, and repeatable way to self-create orbs of power. Star Eater Scales can finally take its place among the greats. So there's a bit of background into why I'm so excited to make some fun and creative builds around Thermoclastic Blooming and Star Eater Scales. Alrighty, let's just jump in and start checking out the build. We'll start with the Stasis aspects and fragments. For aspects, I'm running Grim Harvest and Touch of Winter. Grim Harvest for the Stasis shard creation, and Touch of Winter to maximize our fragment slots. It's important to remember that this build revolves around us collecting orbs of power created by our Withering Strikes, so each aspect will focus on amplifying our melees. The 4 aspects we are running are Whisper of Conduction, causing nearby stasis shards to track to our position, Whisper of Fractures, gaining melee energy when 2 or more targets are nearby, Whisper of Rime, granting us an overshield on shard pickup, and finally Whisper of Hunger, restoring extra melee energy from shards upon pickup. Pretty straightforward so far, maximize our melee uptime. So let's head over to our Armour Mods. Starting with the helmet, we've picked up the reduced cost hands-on mod from the seasonal artifact, which gives us super energy upon melee kill. Gotta run 2 of them. Then in the combat style slot, we've got Heavy Handed, an expensive mod coming in at 7 energy cost, but worth the investment. Each time we throw out our shurikens, we're getting back half of our melee energy, and with 2 stacks of shuriken, that's effectively giving us 3 melees, given we have a charge with light. Arms are up next. Thermoclastic Blooming, of course. Then typically we'll have a champion mod. And finally, I've opted for melee Wellmaker. I'm not 100% sold on this as I'm also running elemental shards, but it can't hurt to have an extra source of wells. Nothing fancy in the chest piece. Concussive Dampener and solar resistance, mainly because I hate it when the knights shoot fire at me. I always try to put one of my most expensive combat style mods in the chest slot since I don't really care for ammo reserves. In this case, we've gone for Well of Potency, another seasonal artifact mod, this one giving us super energy each time we pick up an elemental well. In legs, we've got Absolution, reducing cooldowns of all abilities upon orb pickup, and Installation, the same thing, but only for our class ability. Elemental Charge to give us those 2 stacks of Charge with Light to fuel Heavy Handed. And finally, our class item has Thermoclastic Bloom's younger brother, Thermoclastic Strike, stunning overloads and refreshing our melee on overload stun. We've got one of the utility Kickstart to reduce our class ability, and elemental shards, turning all of our stasis shards into elemental wells. So there you have it. That's going to be all the mods that we are using on today's build. We've got some great ways to create wells. I'm loving the new elemental shards, which turns every shard we pick up into an elemental well, fueling elemental charge, fueling well of potency. It just works so good together. We're finding our super is charged up in no time, and some of the clips we're going to be looking at today really highlight that. Wow. Okay. Lots of talking, lots of mods. Let's go through how it all strings together. Step 1, we find a group of unsuspecting red bars. Step 2, throw the shuriken, proccing hands on, giving us super energy. Pick up the 3 orbs of power, giving more super energy. Pick up the stasis shards, which are also giving super energy. 3 different sources of super energy just from the one melee. We're going to repeat that until our super is full, which, if done correctly, should only be about 3 melees. And of course, step 3, we have now come at a crossroads. Do we A, keep collecting orb of powers to overcharge our silence and squall for the damage buff and overshield, or B, immediately activate our super and start the process again? This one is entirely up to you. With the amount of orbs you'll be generating with this build, both are satisfying options and depend on the playlist activity. In, let's say, Gambit, throwing out as many silence and squalls you can get your hands on can easily change the tide of battle. While in Strike playlists, let's go ahead and chase that fantasy of the most powerful stasis welder in the solar system. I've been having so much fun running this build over the last few days and making the most of Thermoclastic Blooming while we have it. If you want to feel the power of this build right away, I'd personally recommend jumping into some Gambit. It's got high enemy density and ample red bars to farm orbs off. Try and get to that first wave quickly, string together a few melee kills, and you'll have your super before the second wave has even spawned. And the first invasion portal is open. You can go through, invade, completely wreck them with that silence and squall, or just choose to get your team even further ahead by clearing out that entire second wave. I was finding myself getting a full charge of super off every single wave I'm encountering. It's absolutely nutty. I would love to hear any thoughts you may have on how we can further optimize this build. Leave your thoughts in the comment section below, and as always, I'll see you next time, Guardians.